Hey, everybody, we have a really special podcast for you today with Britney Serpa-Smith and special guest co-host Diana Brescia. Unfortunately, Rich stole Diana first for me with Daisy White, but I have her now all to myself because Rich is sick with COVID, and this was supposed to be his interview, but I am honored to be here today with Diana and Britney. And just for a little background, Britney is a cybersecurity professional out of New York City who spends time in Connecticut. She had a normal childhood like most of us, got really sick with Lyme, and like many of us thought maybe she wasn't going to get better. But looking at her questionnaire for this interview, she's been able to make significant progress. She's working, and she's going to be a huge inspiration for everybody listening to this podcast. So I'm really excited to get into it with Britney. So Diana, you want to kick it off and start walking through Britney's life as a kid way before her Lyme journey? What life was like growing up between New York City, Connecticut, and Spain, it seems like, as well.
So nice to meet you, Britney. So another native New Yorker. I'm a New Yorker as well. So kind of tell us about your life before Lyme. What were you doing? What was life like growing up, and how you were before Lyme and everything like that?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk about all these things, and it's definitely interesting just trying to think back on what my life was before Lyme. So I grew up pretty much worry-free childhood, didn't really know anything about ticks, Lyme, or anything like that realm. I grew up in New York City, so I lived in New York City for 10 years, and then my mom ended up getting remarried, or married, not remarried, and so we moved over to Connecticut, and that's where I like to attribute kind of my health downfall. But once I moved to Connecticut, I was very involved socially, academically. I loved sports. I played basketball and softball. Bit of a troublemaker in between 5th grade to 8th grade, but I think most kids kind of go through that stage in life at some point, right? So that was it for me. And then my sophomore year, I ended up living in Spain for a year. I did a study abroad program, which was amazing. I really do suggest people, or I always recommend that people take that opportunity, whether in high school it's a little rare, but in college definitely. So that was pretty much my childhood before the Lyme.
Britney, quick question on that one, because being a New Yorker and being a fellow New Yorker as well, what did you know about Lyme? Because ticks are so prevalent here and Lyme is so prevalent here, yet I didn't know anything about Lyme before I got sick. And then you moved to Connecticut, which is where Lyme was, first discovered by Polly Murray. And
right.
Just today
land of the ticks, as I say, land of the ticks.
It is certainly the land of the ticks. I mean, Dr. Alan McDonald, who was friends with Polly Murray, who was the one who discovered this pattern of this arthritis and this inflammation in the joints. He described it as they were just all these kids that were in wheelchairs or crutches waiting on the school bus line to get on the school bus. And the way he visualized that just seemed like just heartbreaking. And this was decades before you probably moved to Connecticut. So knowing this and knowing that inspired the understanding of what Lyme was, you would think that by the time you moved to Connecticut, people would be super aware of it and say, hey, be careful, ticks are really bad and you can get really sick from Lyme disease. But was that the case?
No, I honestly, when I was diagnosed was probably when I found out what Lyme was. I had no idea what ticks were, to be quite honest. It wasn't something that you talked about in New York City. I mean, now, whenever I can advocate and tell people that, be careful when you're walking on any patch of grass, because you never know if there's a tick, just because now it's all over. And, it's not just in the US, it's in Europe, it's in South America, it's all over the place. So prior to moving to Connecticut, I had no idea. And even when I was in Connecticut, it wasn't really a thought. I think maybe I knew what a tick was, but I didn't know the extent of how bad it could really affect the person's health.
Yeah, for sure. And how old were you when you first got sick?
I was around 17. So it was I was diagnosed my summer before freshman year of college, but I was getting sick for probably 2-3 years before that. So I was undiagnosed for several years before my diagnosis. It was very, very difficult because I was getting sick constantly, but I had no idea what was going on.
What were your symptoms? So it sounds like, what were you, about a freshman in high school when you first got sick?
No, actually probably sophomore, maybe junior year, I would say, in high school. It was a lot before getting diagnosed, it was a lot of the upper respiratory. I was constantly getting strep, just overproduction of mucus, unexplained cough. It just continued, and we had no idea what was going on. Would get strep tests, nothing came up. I had terrible mood swings. One day was super happy, the next day I was on an all-time low. I actually, terrible memory, but I remember getting upset at my mom for trying to take away my phone, and I ended up slamming my head against the desk several times. And it's unexplained, because what child does that? There has to be an underlying reason for that. You don't just go and slam your head onto a desk. But of course the fatigue was there. Trying to think, what else was it before I was diagnosed? I think probably those were the most significant things that I was going through, the significant symptoms that I was going through at that point.
But were you seeing doctors at that point prior to your diagnosis, for any of these upper respiratory infections, for the mood issues, etc.?
No, I think I was just going to my general doctor. I think I had seen a pediatrician, if I'm not mistaken, and that woman was very dismissive. So we didn't really think much of it. We thought, oh, Britney, gets sick once in a while. She gets a cold, or she gets whatever else there is out there, but it'll go away. And
so they just thought it was the common things all the time, over and over and over again.
Yep. Allergies, colds. Sometimes I would have strep. So, when those things, and you don't have the underlying reason, they just exacerbate.
So what's interesting is, and just because this is an audio only podcast, when you have two young women like Diana and yourself who are sick and going to the doctor, I can't help but wonder, does your appearance impact it, right? Because you both look so healthy right now, and you both probably looked healthy when you were younger. So you walk in, they go, you can't possibly be sick. It must just be, you're catching a bug, you're catching a cold. And I just feel like it's probably to our detriment that we have these preconceived notions of what health looks like. Just because you look healthy doesn't mean you are healthy, right? So do you think that played a factor into your health journey prior to your diagnosis, Britney?
Definitely. You don't know how many times I've heard that one. Oh, you look perfectly fine. You look healthy. And I'm like, you have no idea what's going on internally. And I feel like I'm dying. There's days where I feel like I'm absolutely dying. I don't want to get up. To this day, there's times where I just don't want to get up. I don't want to do anything. I just want to stay home, stay in bed, do absolutely nothing. And, when the mentality that's instilled in the States is you just got to push through it, right? We're hustlers. We have to, get up and
going.
Get over it, get it right, keep going. So that's kind of the way it was for me. I think it was maybe a little bit easier to get away with some things when I was younger in college, but now in the workforce is a little bit more it's a little bit more difficult.
Totally. So can you explain a little bit more about, so when did, either you or your family or anyone involved in your life kind of say, okay, wait, this is a little weird. Lots of things are reoccurring. Something must be wrong. People don't really act this way. Major anxiety, mood swings up and down. When was it until someone said, wait, we need to dig deeper here?
Yep. So there were two instances. My first one was I ended up having a syncope episode. So I was actually going and getting the permit test, and I fainted during it. So I was rushed to the ER. No explanation as to why, I fainted, because I'm how old at that point? I'm 17, right? Why am I fainting, right? Taking a permit test. So that was the first time where we're like, everything else that I just explained, and then also the fainting, along with other things that I had missed, the night sweats, the light sensitivity, the air hunger, the body ailments. It kind of didn't make sense. It didn't make sense why a 17-year-old person that looked healthy, right, was going through all these things. And then it wasn't until actually my younger sister, she has her own a separate disease, but she also was diagnosed with Lyme disease. The doctor said, she is flaring like crazy, and that means that somebody in the family is also sick. So we're going to test all of you to see what's going on. And because of that doctor, who is still my doctor to this day, is the reasoning as to why I finally got diagnosed. And the crappy testing that they have. I came up in flying colors, which is hysterical because it's a crappy test, but I also did the IGeneX testing and also came up in flying colors. So
your sister's story, right? What was different about your sister that triggered the thought of Lyme disease and not you? That's where my head is at. Was it just because it was a different doctor who had a different perspective, or was it a different presentation of symptoms that were more traditional Lyme symptoms than yours, which were syncope, which is not as traditional as an early symptom, although it was mine as well, one of my first symptoms. But that's not what people think of as Lyme disease when you're just fainting, right?
Yeah. So she has a different illness, but I don't want to go into what she has just because out of respect for her, but because she tested positive for the Lyme disease and the other disease that she has, that was the reasoning as to why the doctor decided to test us, because of that specific disease. She was flaring and she was at her worst possible. And so that reasoning was as to why the doctor decided to test me and my parents as well.
Were your parents positive?
No, it was just me, me and my sister.
I'm going to back it up a second though. So I'm glad you paused there, Britney. Thank you, because I have so many questions. So when you got your diagnosis through your sister's doctor, and then you backed it up with an IGeneX test, were there other tick-borne infections in addition to Lyme disease that you were diagnosed with?
Yes. So rickettsia, mycoplasma pneumonia, typhus, babesia, and then later on I was diagnosed with rickettsia and Bartonella.
And was this doctor a Lyme litter doctor, or was this just a regular general care? It was a Lyme litter doctor. Okay.
And then I had also seen Dr. Ray Charles Jones.
When you first got sick, just describe for us before you began treatment, did your symptoms worsen, and were there any new symptoms that you haven't mentioned yet before you started treating?
From what I recall, when I started taking antibiotics, they always say you feel worse before you feel better. And I can remember my symptoms just feeling like they were the absolute death of me. But I did end up getting some additional symptoms. Back in 2014, I had flu-like symptoms, so fevers, chills, the body ailments, headache, neck stiffness, discoloration of my skin. Neuropathy has been one that's kind of stuck, and I can kind of touch back on that in a bit. Personality issues, cognitive sleep disturbances, anxiety, OCD, motor tics, short-term memory loss has been a big one for me, muscle tenderness. And these kind of have waxed and wane over the years. So 2015 was probably my worst year. And then the following year, I felt my best because that's when I had started going to the gym. And then between 2018 to 2020, things again wax and wane.
But you were diagnosed in 2014, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you first got diagnosed, obviously you're with a Lyme doctor. I'm curious, what was the treatment regimen that you started with for your diagnosis with all of these co-infections and Lyme disease?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact concoction that I was on, but over the years, I've taken quite a bit of different treatments. So doxycycline, Bactrim, Malarone, terbinafine, Ennula. I don't know how to pronounce this other one. It starts with an S and it ends with an E, and there's a lot of letters in between.
Sulfamethoxyazole. That was not accurate.
It's a long one. Azithromycin, atovaquone, I think. Terbinafine I already mentioned, rifampin, clarithromycin, and Enhensa. So those were some of the treatments that I did. I tried to do some, what was it?
Are those all antibiotics that you just described, or are they just, there was a lot of words there, and some of them I've never heard before?
Yeah, most of them are antibiotics. Yeah.
An herbal route, holistic route at all?
I tried, and quite honestly, I didn't have the best experience with it. I think what worked best for me, because everybody's different, everybody goes through, finding what works best for them, but working on my my food intake and really focusing on, what I should be and shouldn't be eating really helped. And then also making sure I was taking my probiotics, because if it wasn't for that, I don't think I'd be doing well. But I did try the holistic route, and it may have been just the person that I had seen wasn't the person for me. Basically, to give you kind of a summary of what happened, was we did blood work, and she kind of told me what I needed to do, and then told me that I was not allergic to shellfish, which I'm actually anaphylactic. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, I'll die if I eat shellfish. So that for me was a little kind of treading waters right there. And then what was not prescribed, because it was a lot of just, it was vitamins. So I think it was, and I hate to say it, some people really, it's the financial gain of things and the greed. And for me, I just didn't think this person was trying to help me.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely trial and error, like all of it. Yeah.
Right. And
definitely.
there's been doctors, the same thing, who don't want to help, or they don't believe.
Yeah. And I
Lyme.
believe you need to definitely have a connection with your doctor, like for sure. Definitely. I've been through it myself, so I get it.
And
what about
one more thing. Honestly, my doctor has been good with helping me with, he's given me suggestions for holistic things to do, not necessarily, yes, the antibiotics, and obviously antibiotics is not good for you especially if you're taking them long term. And for me, I had taken them for quite a long time. I think the longest was maybe up to a year, and then I would go off of it for a bit to then, it just took a while. But he definitely helped me with trying to figure what's best for me. So I definitely have to say,
and you have to do what's best for you at the end of the day, whatever works for you. What about any physical activity? Do you do yoga? Do you do meditation? Do you lift weights? Anything to kind of incorporate, for your healing process?
Yeah, the biggest thing has been weightlifting for me, especially this year. This year has been one of my best years, and I feel great. My body isn't doing the best that it could be doing, but I do feel great in the sense that weightlifting has really helped me, not only physically, mentally and emotionally, but it has helped me with really focusing on my diet. Diet has been such an important thing for me.
I dived into that this year myself. It has changed my mind, my body in ways I couldn't even imagine. So totally agree with you. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about this real quick? I'm sorry to interrupt, but so this is really interesting, because even pre-Lyme, I always hated weightlifting. I always hated, muscle building. I was always a runner. I was always a cardio guy, right? And then when I first got sick, I had trouble doing the cardio because of all of the inflammation and the autoimmune, triggers. I would go for a walk and I'd be in pain for a week. And I'm finally in a place where I can now do the, cardio again and really get that benefit both physically and mentally, to be honest. But talk to us about I guess the first question I have for you, Britney, is did you have any of those types of barriers where you tried to do workouts and you simply couldn't because of the state of your health? And secondly, why are you choosing weightlifting versus cardio for your physical and emotional health?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll answer the second question first. I actually have started introducing cardio into my weightlifting, my overall gym endeavors. What's the word that I'm looking for?
Routine.
Words can't remember them sometimes. So I started introducing cardio. I started running. I did a 5K probably last month, and it's kind of interesting. I was always a fast runner growing up, but I hated it just because I used to cramp a lot. But it just is wow. It's like euphoric, because you're just in this state of mind where it's almost zen and peaceful, and you're just focusing on one foot over the other and nothing else. And honestly, I really do want to try to run a little bit more, because my focus has been 4 to 5 times in the gym. I'm usually in the gym 4 to 5 times a week, days a week. So that the cardio definitely has been interesting for me, and I'm really happy that I started it. But the weightlifting, and I'm sorry, what was the question that you had asked for I should have answered the
Oh, that's
first
okay.
one.
I actually never ask a 2-part question. That's my fault. So with the weightlifting, because, and it's really a personal intrigue question here as well that I think a lot of listeners will benefit from, is I never enjoyed weightlifting, even before I was sick. And now that I'm able to do more exercise, I still have just a tendency to focus on cardio. So what benefits are you seeing from weightlifting that have helped alleviate some of your physical symptoms and also helped you from an emotional, stance as well? Because I think it's interesting that you're focusing more on the weightlifting than, obviously you're doing cardio, but you mentioned, weightlifting, as your primary focus initially. So what are the benefits you're seeing physically and emotionally from the weightlifting side of things?
I mean, obviously physically I can see improvements, but I think what's important to mention is that when I've always been very small and petite, but with the Lyme, I did go at one point, I gained weight, but for the most part, I was really, I looked, I don't want to say malnourished, but to the point where I just couldn't look at myself in the mirror, because I almost disgusted because I couldn't gain weight. And I've always had a hard time gaining weight, but with the Lyme, it was definitely even harder. So for me, weightlifting and going to the gym and really just trying to add on muscle has been such a big importance in my life. And I think maybe the way I think of it is because I went through those things in the past with my Lyme and how I felt my body image. Now fast forward, where I do feel better in the sense of I'm not at that as sick as I was in the past, but it really has helped me. And I think now that I'm not sure if I have, if I was rebit, or I'm not sure what's going on right now, but I feel the best that I have felt in a long time.
It's interesting because a lot of this stuff, I think with that is, it's that balance of not overdoing it and finding what your limit is. But when you start to make that progress and you get that momentum, you just start to feel better and better and better. And I think like a lot of this stuff is, a lot of people with Lyme have this hypermobility. And I'm not sure if you can relate to that, Brittany, where we're just really like hypermobile, where we're double jointed, we're flexible, like, you're not. Okay. So
I'm absolutely the opposite, which is something that I've been working on. I actually, I had started doing yoga. It's interesting how my mind or my brain works, because there's some things that I get super hyper focused on, and then there's other things where I say, hey, I really want to try this and I really want to do it, but I cannot get my brain to actually do it. And it stinks. It stinks, because there's things like, for example, journaling is super important. And I've heard even people who, I've gotten, my doctor said, hey, I want you to start writing down what you feel like on a day-to-day basis. But for me, that feels like homework. But, there is, right, exactly.
Yep.
So it's interesting, because there are things that I want to add to my routine. And that is very important to me, is the routine aspect. Because before, when I was my sickest, I would really just lounge. And then I would get worse, because then I was in my head and, I was just thinking, and it wasn't good for me. And now that I have my routine, I wake up at 6 a.m, I make my bed, I get ready, I go to the gym, I'm ready for work by 8:30. And the routine kind of like flipped the switch in my brain to make me feel better, or at least trick my brain into thinking that I feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I feel like we have similar stories, which is interesting. I love it.
But I'm curious about the whole brain component of this, right? And I am not, I guess maybe I am now. I was never a woo-woo person. And what I mean by that is I always believed in traditional, Western medicine. But over the past 3.5 years, I very much have recognized it's the whole mind-body connection. And I think that whole routine piece is so important. And, you're doing extremely well. So your routine looks different than people who are really sick still. But I think even people that are really sick can develop a routine that helps them feel better. And that routine can be movement, which is good physically. And then that routine makes them feel better mentally, which then the mental, happiness and the mental chemicals that you're generating from a routine are healing chemicals that your brain releases, right? They're healing hormones. So I think no matter where you are, whether you're at your early stages, just diagnosed, really sick in bed. And I can say when I was really sick and I couldn't do much exercise at all, I would just do physical therapy exercises. I would just do stretches. I would do like literally like 5-pound bell bars, just simple, like lifting them up. Right. And that was meaningful because I was starting to build back muscle and I was feeling better about myself. And I think that helped propel me a little bit forward to do more and more and more and more, understanding there still is physical barriers relating to our illness. So I don't want people to be discouraged thinking, hey, Brittany's running, 5Ks and I can't even get out of bed, right? Because you were there, you were really sick. So we're seeing you now at almost your best, right? So I just want to point that out as well. But
for sure. And everyone's different too. You know, everyone's on their own healing journey. So
And I think even when I was at my worst, I would even try and at a certain point, my sophomore year, I had no feeling in my legs for an entire week. It was miserable. So again, everybody right now, you can look at me and think, oh, wow, she has everything together, but it's taken time, and it's not going to just happen in a day. It can take days, it could take months, it can take years. And it's just part of the process, it's part of the journey. And it's really easy to get discouraged, and I used to get very discouraged. Honestly, to be quite honest, when I first got diagnosed, I was so mad at the world, and I was going into my freshman year of college. You know what freshman year of college is. You want to have fun, you want to party, you want to enjoy life, and to then just be diagnosed with the Lyme disease, I was so mad. And really, because of that mindset that I had, I delayed my treatment. I delayed getting better because I, quite frankly, didn't really care. And I was just, again, really mad at the world. So best advice I can give is don't get discouraged. Don't compare yourself to others, because you really don't know what people are going through. And as we said before, you may look at somebody and you may think that they're healthy, but they may be going through the internal demons inside.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So since we're on the health topic of things, how's your diet? I mean, I'm a foodie. I started my business out of my Lyme disease. It's kitchen remedy. I found my remedy in the kitchen. What's your diet like? Do you have a specific diet, gluten-free, dairy-free? What are you eating these days?
So I guess let me start back to when I first started. And I really had started in the gym my junior year of college, but then I kind of let it go. So it wasn't until this year. But my diet then was I removed gluten, dairy, and sugar from my diet. Now I'm a little bit more lenient. I do definitely am pretty strict with the no sugar rule.
What about natural sugar? Is it just
natural
processed
sugar,
or sugar?
No, just artificial processed sugar is a no. And because I had parasites, really that's what they crave or that's what they want. That was the big component of me just knocking out sugar. And I do a lot better. I don't drink caffeine. I don't drink sugar, or I don't eat sugar. I've been trying to do the gluten again. And then dairy's been pretty low, honestly. So I try to really keep myself from being, I want to be strict with myself as much as possible. But again, you can't follow it to a T. You have to enjoy your life as well, right? So
you have to be realistic, right?
Yeah, exactly. The weekends is for me to really enjoy myself, but that has been very helpful for me, especially with the gym component and wanting to try to gain weight.
With the parasites, did that come later on, or was that part of your first diagnosis as well?
That was part of my first diagnosis, and that's the typhus.
Okay.
Yep.
Did did everything you did, you listed all those treatments. It sounds like there was about a year there. And then after that first year of being treated, you were a freshman in college, maybe by sophomore, you started to bounce back a little bit. Is that, or did I misunderstand that that
No,
piece there?
sophomore year was my worst year. So
Okay.
the treatments that I had listed earlier, those have been the treatments that I have taken from when I was first diagnosed until now.
Gotcha.
Right now, I'm not taking anything. I'm not sure if that's going to change based off this blood work that I just got. But pretty much I can't really pinpoint, and I do have a medical binder that I always bring to my doctors, but I don't have it with me currently. So it was a little bit difficult to write out what medications I was taking at certain points throughout my journey.
And that's really common to do things on and off, but it sounds like freshman year, you're starting treatment. Sophomore year, you're at your worst, you're still treating. And then junior year is when you're hitting the gym, where you started to, at least you said earlier, right? So you must be feeling good if you're hitting the gym or starting to at that point. So
yeah, I definitely was still going through, my flare-ups and such, but the gym definitely helped me. And then senior year, I was still taking treatment then too. So for those 4 years, I was taking treatment on and off, and then I was rebit in 2020 and took some antibiotics for maybe, I want to say 4 or 5 months. It all kind of, it's interesting because it all kind of just what's the word that I'm looking for?
it all meshes together.
It does.
Yeah.
Together, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit difficult to really pinpoint when things happen or when I took certain things. So it's a little bit difficult, especially with my mind and my memory.
So you would say this is what? How long of a time frame? Like a 7-8 year time frame of everything going on from like initial weird things started happening till present day today? 7 to 8?
10 years now.
10 years, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And from when I was diagnosed,
that seems to be a trend, I feel. Like
Yeah.
same
from
with
when
me.
I was diagnosed.
Same.
Yeah, from when I was diagnosed until I'm going to be 27 in August. So yeah, it's been 10 years. Holy crap, I didn't even think of that.
Crazy.
But think of how far you've come, Brittany. I mean, oh my goodness! Like hearing, like your legs were numb, right? I mean, you had this debilitating neuropathy. You had this debilitating cognitive impact. And I want to ask you about that, because now you pretty much were diagnosed and treating your heaviest when you were in college for 4 years, but yet you remained in college. And I mean, that in itself is a testament to how strong you were, because you were extremely sick. You stayed in college, you continued, you graduated. Here you are today, a cybersecurity professional, which is like mind blowing that, I mean, obviously you're super smart, but that's a very difficult profession to be in. So when you were in college, talk to us about the social impacts your illness had on you, because we know that the whole personality side of things and the cognitive side of things. So you're not on your game intellectually because you have brain fog, you feel insecure because you're not as sharp as you used to be. Then you have the personality side of things, which is you can have Lyme rage, you can have this anger, you can have this ranging of emotions, really happy, really sad, really hard to be around from a personality standpoint. And then you're really sick physically as well, and you have this neuropathy, and you have all these confusing symptoms. How did it impact your relationships with romantic relationships, social relationships, and your family, with your parents and your sister and whoever else that you had in your life at the time?
Yeah. First and foremost, I really have to thank Quinnipiac and just mostly the professors, and then also the Learning Commons, for really sticking by my side and helping me throughout those years, because if it wasn't for them, I don't think I would have continued. And also my family, because my mom was driving back and forth almost, I wouldn't say every weekend, but often, to either come take care of me, take me home, take me to doctor's appointments. So that was very crucial, and that was very important to mention. Second, relationships with family, friends, and intimate relationships. It's been very challenging, honestly. With my family, I'm gonna say that most people are gonna tell you they'll take it out on their family, right? Anything that's going on in the life, it's the first people that it's gonna go towards is your family members. So the rages and such that was always taken on my family members, and having another individual in the home that was also sick at the time, it didn't really help. So, but I was also in college, so I didn't really have to worry too much about the relationship aspect with my family. And I think they were at least they tried to be understanding of what I was going through, and especially with my younger sister. So, but with relationships, it was definitely difficult. And honestly, I mean, I remember having my episodes, and I had to kind of explain to, my partner at the time that this is something that my body does, and it's fighting itself, and I don't really know how to, not that I didn't know how to deal with it, but it was very interesting. And I think, for me, it's a little bit difficult to remember back on the relationships that I had with my significant others at that point in time. But as I got a little bit older, for example, Brendan, he's my ex-boyfriend, but we're still very close, and we're really good friends. He really was like super, super great when it came to my Lyme, and he was super understanding. And when I would have, I call them like seizure-like episodes where my body would go into shock and I couldn't speak, I would be shaking, and he knew how to pretty much take care of me, because not many people usually would it's either like a fight or flight response, right? So usually some people would be like, what the hell is going on? I don't know what's going on, I'm leaving. But he was super, super great, and he really helped me out, and he stuck by me, and really was great to have somebody that was understanding. So I think that's a very key component of being in a relationship, is having somebody who's understanding.
Absolutely. I could totally agree with this. We need a whole podcast episode on this. Exactly. Relationships in Lyme. I agree with you completely.
Yes. Totally. Because then there's some people, and now that I remember, is I had been with somebody, I think my junior year it was, and he wasn't as understanding, or he exacerbated my symptoms. And that is also very important, is that if you have people that cause anxiety and stress, it's going to make you 10 times worse.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let me ask a question on that.
You need a safe space.
Oh, I'm sorry, Diana. Actually, it's for both of you. Because the whole relationship topic is fascinating for me, because Lyme just can affect you so deeply. And I think it can make you extremely insecure, and it can make you almost, I'll say, accept things you shouldn't accept in romantic relationships, right? So it sounds like, Britney, you worked on that. Were you in therapy? What helped you be so strong and emotional to say, hey, I know I deserve love, and I'm gonna engage in relationships, and if they're not serving me, I'm gonna move on and find somebody who does serve me. Like, I think, was it Steve? Is that what you said? What was his name? Brendan. I'm sorry, because Brendan seemed like an amazing guy, and I'm glad you're still friends with him. You need more Brendans in your life, right? So
we all need Brendan.
Yes.
Where do I find a Brendan?
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
But I was going to ask too. So, like Matt just said, do you have any spiritual practices? Like, what keeps you in that positive headspace? Or can you do meditation? Anything? It's
funny because I'm just going through those motions and those steps right now. I just started going. I had gone to therapy probably around the time that I was dating him, and I just remember my mind just being all over the place, and I was insecure, and the body dysmorphia, and then having all the Lyme symptoms as well. I was all over the place, but not that I didn't take it seriously. I think now I, recently went through I don't want to call it a relationship, but I went through a bad relationship. And so, I went through a bad relationship, and it kind of set in stone that I really needed to take care of myself. Because you can have an amazing person in your life, but if you're not in tune with yourself and you're not happy with yourself, it is very difficult to bring somebody else into that journey, especially if you have any type of illness, right? So for me, I really just started with this probably several months ago, so 3 months ago, and just learning what I need to do in order to be my healthiest and in the right mental headspace.
Good for you. Yeah,
Exactly.
like be good for you. So are you
Exactly.
talking about therapy or like a spiritual practice or both? Because I feel like
Therapy.
also, okay, therapy. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Therapy has been great. I'm very happy that I'm doing it, and I'm going in with really just laying it all out there, because in the past I kind of refrain or not talk about certain things, but that's the whole point of therapy, is
Let it out, girl.
letting it
you
out,
have
right?
to let it out.
Yeah. So
definitely.
there's definitely things that I've started talking about, and I'm 27, or gonna be 27, so it's not easy. I will not say to you that it's easy. It's a process and it's a journey, just like going through the Lyme. But once you start, taking those baby steps, you're going to be off and running after, some time.
Exactly.
Give us some tips though, right? Like what are you learning that's helping you identify your self-worth and improve yourself so you're able to better receive good people in your life?
Yeah. I think values is a very, very crucial thing right now. Learning what my values are, and then also learning what the values I would want in, my next partner. But right now I'm really focusing on myself and my healing journey, and not just, what's internal, but everything as a whole. Because for me, I've just neglected my mental headspace for a long time, and definitely the Lyme affected that part of the journey, and I kind of just put it to the side. But really, really focusing on that, just figuring out exactly what my values are, what makes me happy, my non-negotiables. That is the most important thing for me right now.
I love that. So let's circle back to your health, right? So you're in college and you're a junior, you do well, you start to make some progress. And it sounds like, so again, freshman year, sophomore year was your worst. You're a junior, you're doing better, you're continuing to treat. And then you said in 2020, you were reinfected. So in 2020, were you out of college? Did you graduate at that point?
I already graduated. I graduated in 2018. In 2020, I was in my master's program, actually. So I feel like every time I've been, getting some type of degree, I'm usually sick.
So, but what happened before the reinfection and the rest of your college career? So we don't miss that part of your journey, right? So your senior year, you were doing well. Your junior year, did your health continue to improve overall with some bumps in the road up until the reinfection, or was there some other parts of your journey that we need to touch on before we move on to your reinfection?
No, I had a lot of, like, still, you have the symptoms that are still there, that linger. At that point, between 2020 and 2022, my goal for me was to pay off my student loans. So I was bartending, which, think about my symptoms, and my main symptoms were the fatigue and then the muscle pains. So I was constantly on my 2 feet, and I had, to stand pretty much all day. But I think my mindset is just, you're tough, you have to power through it. And it's not the best way to be. I don't think it's, you shouldn't have to think that way. But for me, that's just kind of how I am as an individual, and kind of how I grew up, is just be tough and
pushing through.
Yeah. But I remember I would call my mom crying. I'm hurting so much right now, Mom. I just want to go home. I need something. I need Advil. I don't feel good. I want to go to sleep. I'm tired. Why am I doing this to myself? And I would go back and forth. Is this really, what I should be doing? Does it make sense? It was a battle. It was definitely a battle. It wasn't as bad from when I was in college, but I remember the back pains being excruciating. It was awful.
How is your Lyme doc responding to this, right? Because you're still seeing the same Lyme doctor, and you're having these severe flare-ups when you're pushing yourself and you're bartending and you're on your feet. Was he changing up your treatment protocol to try to respond to this, and it just wasn't working as well as you wanted it to?
Yeah, I think at that point, so the mycoplasma for me has kind of just lingered. So I would go on the antibiotics and then go off of them for some time just to see if was feeling better. Also, you don't want to be on antibiotics for that long. I think that was the primary reason as to why I was feeling that way. But I can't really recall at that point. I know I was going to the doctor, and I think I was going and getting blood work, but nothing for the Lyme was showing up. So I think it was more so like, oh, you're low on these certain vitamins. You need to start, eating a little bit more to target those certain vitamin groups, or taking vitamin supplements. So
did you believe it at the time? Because it sounds like to me, as a third party, I'm a little skeptical of that response. Seems a little shady to me, almost like dismissive of, we don't know what's going on, so it's just your vitamins, when really there was probably something else bubbling up from underneath.
Again, I don't really recall at that point. For me, again, the memory is a little hazy. I may have been on antibiotics for something, but I can't recall at the moment.
So you're just basically fighting through life. You're in now getting your master's degree, and you're reinfected, right? Is that what you said earlier? So circling back to that, did you finally take biting you? How did you know you were reinfected?
No. I haven't found any bullseye since 2014 or before then. So I have had absolutely no idea when I've gotten bit. So it's pretty interesting. I wish I would get the bullseye, because then obviously, we all wish we would get the bullseye right away, or not even get bit, to be quite honest.
Yep.
But yeah.
So you just assumed that you were reinfected because probably flare-ups and whatnot, or?
Yes, I completely missed the question. The flare-ups started again, and they were a lot worse. And I think it was, I can't remember the depth timeline. Let me see. I didn't even write it down. But
well, I mean, it sounds like your symptoms were creeping back until it finally hit you and your doctor that something's going on. I think I've been reinfected, right? And then you probably followed up with some additional testing, which resulted in some sort of positive something, right? Is that right. What happened? Yep. What popped positive when you retested based on all these clues that you were seeing in your declining health?
I do not remember the exact thing that was. I think it might have been alopecia and Bartonella, but I can't remember. Again, it is. I really give props to the people that come on the podcast and remember everything, or try to remember everything in the time frames. But Brittany, it is really hard.
Nobody remembers everything. Nobody, not anything. One single person.
It's so hard.
Stop being hard on yourself.
Hard. But that's just how I am. No.
I have to make an observation, and we're very honest in this podcast, and I know you are in a very good place to receive this. So I just want to say, I applaud your go, fight through it attitude, but I think that attitude and working through the pain and bartending and being in a place that may have been filled with smoke, may have been keeping you up late when you should be sleeping, putting stress on you emotionally and physically, was weakening your immune system and making your body more susceptible to either a relapse or B, a reinfection, which probably both occurred, right? And I think you're looking back and realizing, like, hey, whether you're sick or not, having a balanced lifestyle will help you maintain health, whether you're sick or not. And I think that's kind of where you're going to, and I'm seeing that.
It is.
So many of us that are on this podcast are the go, fight people. And that's why we get so sick and end up in the places we're in, right? And is that what you see in yourself?
Oh, definitely. I think now my work to life and social, the work, social, and just overall life, there's a better balance, because now I'm making sure I'm sleeping the amount of hours that I should be sleeping. I'm making sure I'm getting the proper nutrients that I need. I'm making sure that, my stress levels are maintained. So it has been interesting to see what I was in the past, especially when I was my most sick, to now where, my job, and I have to thank my boss for being awesome and really being supportive, but he always does health first, which, it may not be the case for most people or some people. And it's really sad that there's individuals out there that don't really care about other people. And so I do have to give him props. But for me, honestly, again, because of my routine and really making sure I'm focusing on the things that I hadn't focused on in the past. I think that is why I feel better.
That's powerful. And
Definitely.
I think from somebody like yourself, Britney, who had that realization, I think is proof positive that with proper treatment and proper respect of our boundaries and what our body is capable of, we can attain health and we can feel better. And I don't want to use the word, people use the word cure and it's super triggering in this community. But the word, whatever you want to call it, remission or cure, I like to say we can feel better. And what I mean by that is, like, I accepted a place where I thought I'm going to be like this the rest of my life. I can't make progress, but I was wrong. And I was able to feel better. So no matter where we are, whoever we are listening to this podcast, I believe we can take steps to make ourselves feel even better than we are today. And I think that's kind of what you're describing is you recognize that you can continue to feel better, but in order to do that, you had to make lifestyle changes to make that more sustainable, right? That's what we're talking about here.
Oh my gosh,
that's the power.
Definitely. I mean, going from freshman year where I was partying all the time, absolutely destroying my immune system even more, and then now actually starting to kind of work on it and make sure that I'm doing what I need to do by junior year to then. And at that point too, in college, I was working 2-3 jobs. So I realistically, up until now, had really not focused on all the aspects that I just mentioned before. I was not sleeping the way I should be sleeping. I had so much stress that was coming from, school, work, relationships, friendships, family, and it really shows that it takes time. It takes progress. It really takes, really sitting there and trying to figure yourself out as an individual, because you're gonna go through those steps. And I think it's interesting because it's conversations that you don't even think about it. I'm not thinking about it in the Lyme sense, but the conversations that you used to have with your parents when you were younger and you would go through these phases. Right. So when it comes to Lyme, you're going through the phases of trying to figure out what works best, or, that's what, at least for me, it was the phases and me realizing, hey, I probably shouldn't be binge drinking until, I don't know, 3 a.m, right? Or I shouldn't be overworking myself to the point where I'm crying in the back room. So it's really just going through the motions and the phases and trying to figure out what works best and what doesn't work best.
And that's hard, right? Because you look at other people around you, especially when you're in college, and you're saying, well, John Doe can do it. Why can't I do it? He's drinking until 6 a.m. and he's get up and go to class the next day. So it's really hard when you think, why am I different? What's wrong with me? But it's once we realize that we can feel better by setting proper boundaries, I think that realization is huge to have that realization, but it just takes a while for us to get there. And I'm not saying that this is our fault, right? I mean, because your illness is what put those severe restrictions on you compared to other people. But we have the illness, and therefore we have to respond differently than other people if we want to feel good. And I think that's where that difference is, right? It's not our fault, but we can help ourselves make progress quicker if we take proper steps. And I think that's what you're outlining. But I want to take a second just to highlight how cool you are and how brave you are and how much of a fighter you are, because not only did you graduate from Quinnipiac University with a BA in criminal justice while suffering and treating, not only did you get reinfected when you were getting your master's degree at Sacred Heart University, where you got a master's in science and cybersecurity, you were sick your entire educational career, but yet you still graduated and you're a cybersecurity professional today, despite all of that, right? And again, I know people listening are like, well, she doesn't understand. She wasn't as sick as I was, but that's simply not true. I mean, you literally couldn't feel your legs, right? You had this debilitating neuropathy. You had this, but a lot of what you're describing now is when you were feeling better and the struggle you had trying to reacclimate back into life, but not being, quote unquote, normal enough to be in that normal lifestyle. But you were debilitated at one point. So the hopeful part of this is people can get better, and you're a model for success for those people. But, tell us how you managed to do it, because I didn't get sick until after I graduated college, and right after my master's degree. But I can't imagine going through college and being as sick as I was and as sick as you were and being able to get through it. I am not as strong as you, Britney. I couldn't do it. So what was in you what drives you to continue to not drop out of college and get a degree and pursue your career despite being so sick?
Let me tell you that idea of dropping out came across my mind a lot, and especially my sophomore year. I remember being in the health center constantly and just, calling my mom and saying, "What am I doing right now?" It was difficult. I can't lie. It was really hard. It was very, very difficult. But as I said before, I really have to give props to my professors and really just Quinnipiac as a whole, and even further on at Sacred Heart, for just having people that were very understanding. And you're not always going to come across people who are understanding, and I had my fair share of people who didn't care to understand or didn't want to, or maybe just didn't like me and didn't really, again, didn't care or didn't want to. But to the people that were there and in my corner, and also my parents, I think that's what drove me and pushed me. Because if it wasn't for them, I don't think I'd be where I am today. That's for sure. Because I think just having that support system,
having that support,
very important. So, yeah.
What did you do when you got reinfected? So was it just going back to the regimen that you were on prior? It was the same course of drugs that you mentioned, and that helped you rebound from the reinfection?
In 2020?
Yes.
I think, I'm trying to think, because it was a little bit, at that point, I was living with Brendan, actually. So we just honestly, yeah, we ate pretty healthy. I wasn't my healthiest, so I wasn't going to the gym at that point. So I think it was really just pushing through it. At that point, it's interesting because my mindset has shifted over the years, and really just, now it's definitely a healthier perspective, and the way I push myself is a lot different from when I was, or when I back then. But when I got reinfected, I wasn't my healthiest all around, because I wasn't my sickest, but I wasn't my healthiest. So
but were you treating with your Lyme doctor still, even though you were doing those lifestyle and diet and other things? You were treating with your doctor, and he was giving you drugs specific to whatever popped positive on your reinfection test, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and that was, I believe, it was the Rickettsia and Bartonella.
Yeah, and knowing, I mean, look, the fact that you tested positive for all these things, who knows what else you had? Because we know there's so many different strains of all these different diseases, from European strains to Lyme alone in the US has a wide variety of strains. So I can't even imagine what else your body was fighting at the time. But I do want to ask, right? So we just finished our Lyme hackathon a couple of weeks ago, and people love hearing tips and tricks. So if you had to reflect back on your entire Lyme journey, what is something, whether it be a therapy tip, whether it be a hack as far as a drug or a tool to help alleviate symptoms, what would be the one thing or things that helped you the most that you can share with our listeners that are going through a Lyme journey?
Yeah, I have a few. So just based off of what I previously mentioned, I think staying on top of your treatment, whatever your regimen is, to stay on top of that. Really don't neglect it. Try to make sure that, if whatever you're doing or taking, make sure you're on top of it, because it will delay your treatment. For me, I delayed it probably several years because I was not the smartest, but I've since learned from that. And that to me was, if I could go back and yell at my 18-year-old self, that's what I would have told myself. Stay on top of your treatment. Be an advocate. You don't really know what people are going through. Don't dismiss people. Don't get discouraged. Don't compare, because that is it. You can get really down on yourself when it comes to having any illness, not just Lyme disease and co-infections. So really be an advocate. Try to be there for people, and it doesn't have to be just for the Lyme, but just remember, we deal with it all the time. Oh, you don't look sick, so you must not be sick. You don't know what people are going through. So just try to be, again, advocate for people, and then also treat people how you want to be treated. And then if you get dismissed by a professional, always go with your gut feeling. That's something that I'm learning right now, is through therapy. Go with your gut feeling always. So if you feel that a professional is dismissing what you're going through, then you have to go and get opinions from other people.
Then I totally have been going on here. I'm gonna defer to you, Diana, with if you have any more questions. I know I've asked a lot, but
yes, no, I love it. So I have one question. It's a little bit deep, but I feel like Lyme has everyone in this community, it's taught each and every one of us something different. Has it taught you anything? Like, what is one thing this whole chronic illness journey has taught you?
Not to compare yourself to others and other people's journeys. You know, you may hear that some people find the right treatment early on and, you know, get treated faster, or, you know, in some cases it's the opposite. But really just try not to compare what you're going through to others, because again, you don't know what these people are going through. You're not in their shoes. So we all might have Lyme disease and co-infections, but we're not going through the same motions as the other person.
Absolutely. And one more question. So what advice would you give to others who are in the throes of Lyme disease right now? Like, what are your top 3 or 4 things?
I kind of answered that with your question, Matt. So
yeah,
or like your top 4, or
that was just stay on top of the treatment, advocate, and then go with your gut feeling.
Okay.
But let me expand upon that a bit, because I think, Diana, one of the questions that I would like to ask people is, we talk about fight or flight. And for me, I was certainly at one point in the flight stage of things. I was so afraid to do anything because I'd made some progress in my healing journey, and I was afraid to fall back to where I was. So for years, I stayed there and didn't do anything because I was so afraid. So in that regard specifically, Britney, I know you seem like you never had that. You always had that drive to keep treating.
Right.
But from that fear standpoint and that lack of action, what advice would you give to people? Because you're the perfect model of not being afraid and fighting. What advice would you give to Matt Sabatello when he was afraid for 4 years and wasn't doing anything? What would you do to slap me around and say, get out of that funk and start doing things to feel better? What would you say to me?
Well, on one portion of it, I was afraid, and I was afraid of nature, honestly. I went to Quinnipiac, and if you ever look up Quinnipiac University, you have the Sleeping Giant hike, which everybody goes on. I did not step foot there once. That was an absolutely no-go. I would not step on any patch of grass. I absolutely refused. So yes, we may look at or hear me and say that, you know, I don't have fear, but I definitely had fear, and it was, you know, to step outside of the nature world, because again, I'm also a city girl. I do not like nature. So I do avoid it as much as possible. But another advice that I could probably give is, and it's hard because, you know, people can give you advice, but it really takes yourself to really get yourself to where you need to be. I had so many people tell me, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. But it wasn't until I decided and I had that internal dialogue with myself that I said, okay, it needs to happen. And you don't have to go full 100. Absolutely not. Take baby steps. You know, if let's say your goal, set goals. So say you want to run a marathon. Why do you have to run a marathon right away? Go for a walk, go for a 5-minute walk. And, you know, for me, where I had the debilitating ailments of not being able to walk at a certain point, go sit outside. Try to get yourself to just get up, because, you know, I'm not here to tell you to just go. Absolutely not. But if you can do something that you normally wouldn't, try it. Try to get up, try to make your bed, try to do something that you normally wouldn't do, or your mind is telling you you can't do it. But try, just at least try, because if you at least try, you're making the steps to really progress. And I think that was something that was very important for me, because I wasn't yeah, I may have been go, 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 but there was definitely times where I was stay, and then stay in bed. So, and I would call my mom crying. So don't listen to me and think that I was always go, 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 because it took baby steps, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So
I admire you for doing that though,
Yeah,
because I'm
yeah.
the more fearful kind of person, but
I'm in
Yeah.
that boat, Diana, as well. And let's channel a fake conversation here. So I'm Brittany, and Brittany, you're
Mhm.
your mom. Okay. So you got to be your mom and give me good advice here. So I call
You
you,
got to get my mom on the podcast.
what's your mom's name, Brittany?
Anita.
Anita. Okay. So Anita, quote unquote, I have this new medication that I think is going to help me. And one of the disclaimers says it may cause dizziness. I'm really afraid to do this because when I was at my worst, I couldn't get out of bed. I was so dizzy. And if I did, I'd fall on the floor and I'd walk into walls. I'm not doing this, Mom. I'm just not doing it. What do you think?
Whatever your body's telling you is what you do. So if you're not feeling that it's helping you, then we're going to try a different what's the word that I'm looking for?
We're going to pivot. We're going to pivot.
We're going to pivot,
Yeah.
like Ross said in Friends.
Yep, pivot.
Yeah.
But here's the key. Should I try it? Because I think the fear of trying new things is what keeps people sick, right? So you jump to part 2, which I think is if it doesn't work for you, you need to listen to your body and pivot and move on. But the fear of trying something is where I was, and I think where Diana, you were, and you're just like, hey, I was never afraid to try any medication. So I'm jumping right to step 2 here. But would you recommend, hey, you got to get over that fear? Because what I've realized, Brittany, is oftentimes, even if I have a severe reaction to something, when I stop that something, whatever it is, I go back to my baseline. I don't stay where I was, even if there's a flare. And I think that fear is so real for so many. And it's very empowering to see that you have this courage. But what are your thoughts when you try new things? Did you ever get stuck? Was it like a permanent, oh my God, I never should have done that? Or everything you did contributed to where you are today and why you're so healthy today, right?
I mean, I can actually recall one medication that threw me in for a loop. Like I felt absolutely crappy and I said, I will never take this again. And I think I had taken it maybe once or twice. And that for it to affect me like the way it did, I felt like I was on hallucinogens. Like I felt like everything was going super slow and I was losing it. Like I was absolutely losing it. It was rifampin. And for me, that fear was now it's embedded into my brain where some of these antibiotics that I've taken, I'm like, but it causes this. So I don't want to take it. I don't want to take it again. And honestly, I hate going to the doctors. I hate having to go back and say, go through the motions and potentially, have to go back on antibiotics because I do not like taking antibiotics. I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, I think it gets worse before it gets better. And I've gone through horrible symptoms from the antibiotics that to this day I get scared of having to go back on it.
Yeah, and that what I'll call PTSD is real, I feel like, right? I mean, these fears are valid fears, but yet you were reinfected and you still went back on antibiotics, and you did, and you got better, right? So I think that's the key.
Yes, and I stick to the antibiotics that I've already gone through because I did list out I had a whole list of antibiotics that I've taken over the years, but there's the certain ones that I know that they don't cause, the secondary side effects, or they don't cause as bad secondary side effects that, I know that it's okay. But then there's other ones where I'm like, no, I'm staying so far away from those. Do not even, I will kick it out of your hand. They're like, get away from me.
But those are your personal hacks. You've shortcut your healing journey for your reinfection because you knew what worked and didn't work for you as a person. For Britney Serpa-Smith, you knew what worked for you, so you went back to what worked, and it did work again. But you weren't afraid initially to try a whole wide range of things to determine what worked for you and what didn't. So I think that's really good advice. Is once you know what worked for you, if you get reinfected or have a flare, fall back on that. Build a toolbox. Know what your personal toolbox is and fall back on that as you need it with a healthy lifestyle. And that's kind of what my takeaway is for your journey.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely trial and error for sure. You're not going to get the pieces right away. It's a puzzle. It's a puzzle that has 1,000 pieces. It's not a puzzle that has 10 pieces to it. So you gotta find what fits and what works for you and stick to that completed puzzle, right? So for me, that's my mindset. Depending on what my results say, once I get them back, that's what I'll fall on. But right now, also continuing with the routine has been really helping me. So really stick to those things.
Have there been any recent discoveries, anything we missed recently that has been a revelation in your health journey, or anything that we haven't talked about that's really pertinent for our audience?
Yeah, so I have a suspected diagnosis, and I had mentioned the syncope. I actually think that it may be, and I might butcher this, so bear with me, chronic inflammatory
Demyelination, I think I'm saying it right.
Yes, polyneuropathy. So essentially, hold on, let me recollect my thoughts. So the neurotransmitters aren't insulated properly, and so the signals aren't sending as fast as they should, which is causing the dizziness, the fainting, the muscle spasms. So we're following up on that. We're going to see, and then because that is immunodeficiency, and also the encephalopathy portion of it, I might be doing IVIG. So yeah, it's been
well, IVIG I think is a great tool. One of my mentor in this community, who really brought us into Tick Boot Camp and guided us, Ali Moresco, she did it and really had some great benefit from IVIG, although it's very difficult to get it covered by insurance.
Yes.
And there are some hacks. If you need that, I would recommend reaching out maybe to you, Britney, if you know them, or Ali, because you guys know the hacks to be able to get insurance to cover it, which is, it's ridiculous if you go through these gyrations, but you can get it covered under insurance if you go through the proper procedure. But when it comes to that, I can't help but think that Lyme disease, a lot of research, especially over the last 5 years. I mean, frankly, the research started in the 80s, but it was rejected, and it's been picked up again over the last 5 years about the neurodegenerative impact of Lyme disease and co-infections. And it gets into your brain. It impacts your nerves. It strips away the lining of your nerve cells, which is what you just described. And that damage can be from Lyme disease. I mean, do you believe that? Have your doctor suggested that there can be a correlation between Lyme and the damage from Lyme causing now this condition or this damage from the bacteria and the infections that you had?
Of course. And that's something that my sister's dealing with. So for her, she was misdiagnosed with strep, and that caused the encephalopathy. And now she has to do IVIG for the rest of her life, which is unfortunate. So just kind of seeing exactly what she's gone through and the benefits of IVIG. Again, it kind of stinks that she has to do it for the rest of her life, but it has helped her, and it has balanced out her immune system. And hopefully, depending on what my course of action is, it will help me too, because, I've been going through all these things, the upper respiratory that's just constantly lingered. And, I thought it was allergies or it was strep. I got my tonsils removed, which did help a little bit, but I'm still constantly, clearing my throat with the cough. So, and I do have something else, but insurance doesn't think it's an actual immunodeficiency. So that stinks, because I lack protein in my white blood cells, and that's what the upper respiratory, I keep constantly getting sick. So it's definitely it's been an interesting journey, that's for sure. And yeah, I hope, we'll see if it's just that hold on, sorry. See if it's just that diagnosis, or if it's the tick-borne infection resulting in the CIDP. So we'll see.
Diana, did you want to jump in? I don't know if I was gonna step on you again.
No, I have a question too, but we'll probably be here for like another 3 hours. But quick question: did you ever get tested for mold toxicity at all?
I was thinking the same thing.
I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not sure. That doesn't ring a bell, to be quite honest.
What you just described, and I'm going to tell you, this is a wild, what you just described is like ding, 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 mold, right? So especially in New York City, especially in these, these wet climates and older buildings and older structures like New York City, if you there are certain genetic tests as well. But if you are more susceptible to mold illness, which all of us with chronic Lyme, we have compromised immune systems, and therefore we're more susceptible to mold illness. But if we have a genetic predisposition, and there's various genetic predispositions to mold, it's even harder for us to respond to exposure to mold. And what you just described with your upper respiratory, your sinuses, all that is very much indicative of mold reactions in people with Lyme disease. And I have to tell you, sometimes, like I'm currently doing it. I do it on the weekends because it's so aggressive when I work that I just certain unpleasant side effects that I can't deal with when I have to work. But I will take 40 chlorella, and it's just a binder. But I literally, and I described this to Rich like 2 weeks ago, I feel like my sinus is being like pulled out of my face and like draining when I take chlorella, because it binds heavy metals, it binds mold, and then it helps you pass it out of your body, but it pulls it out of your sinuses and stuff. So I'm not an expert in mold. There are plenty of people out there in the Lyme community who are, like Michelle McKeon, who I would highly recommend you check out. She's the Lyme specialist. She's like super well versed in mold, but I think that's an area to look into as well. Yeah. And I think, Diana, you probably have a lot more information than I do. If you want to go on, maybe give some more detail.
Definitely send me the information, because it's actually funny. My worst year at Quinnipiac, fast forward, we ended up finding out that there was asbestos.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So, I'm pretty sure if you don't touch asbestos, it's okay. But because I'm already immunocompromised, that it probably affected me, and makes sense as to why I felt my worst that year.
We'll connect after the show. I'll send you my info. We can have conversations, because I think it's worth checking out. I have mold as well too. So yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah,
absolutely. I love it. I love that we can all bounce off of each other.
Absolutely.
So, Diana, did you have any more questions? Because I don't want to keep going.
No, I don't.
So I did, and then my brain got distracted talking about Lyme brain, but there were several other questions I had. So what was it? We're talking about that, your current symptoms, and so I wanted to tie it back to, we talked about Polly Murray, right? Who was, are you familiar with Britney? She's the mom, right, who discovered the pattern we talked about earlier of all the young children in Lyme, Connecticut, who forced the hand of all the government agencies to come in and do the study, and that's where Willie Bergdorfer got involved and started dragging ticks on Long Island, and the whole thing back in the 70s. But we just learned today, and I mentioned earlier, we're talking to Dr. Alan McDonald, who has done a lot of work with Dr. Ava Shappy, who are our two leaders in the research community for Lyme disease. And she has passed away. I think she passed away in 2019, Polly Murray. But she had for almost 10 years, a neurodegenerative disease, which now they're realizing was connected to Lyme disease, because they're proving, and we actually have a link on our website. We did a blog post where Dr. McDonald 2 years ago published a study about every patient he studied with these neurodegenerative conditions, whether it's Lewy body dementia, whether it's Alzheimer's, whether it's, whatever it may be, they all had the Borrelia bacteria in their brain, and they just weren't effectively able to manage it. So I think there's a huge connection there. And I think it's important to note, because sometimes we think that, well, it may not be related, it may be related, but I think as we start to put these connections together, we're realizing it's definitely related, and we're starting to better understand how to address these things. And that's the passion of Dr. McDonald, is how can we help people who are experiencing these neurodegenerative symptoms that have had chronic Lyme? We can help them, and we need to recognize that this connection is real, and we have tools to help these people. So I encourage you and everybody else to listen to that podcast. If you go to our website and just type in Dr. Alan McDonald, you'll see we've had him on the podcast several times. He's a brilliant pathologist and researcher who's done autopsies on brains and all kinds of crazy studies in the Lyme community. But this is the kind of information that I think is going to bring it together to get you on your final sprint of your healing journey, I feel like, Britney. So it's been empowering. Diana, I know you said you have no more questions, but I just want to conclude with some contact information, because I know all three of us are advocates. I know, Diana, you want to help people. I know, Britney, you want to help people. So Britney, your social is, you're on Instagram, you're what are you? BSERPSS_, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That is.
So that's Instagram.com/BSERPSS_. And Diana, you are just Diana Brescia. That's DIANNA. BRESCIA is your Instagram. Yes. However, we also have to give a shout out to Diana's website, The Kitchen Remedy. So Diana, out of an inspiration, and if you haven't already, check out Diana's podcast. Diana, what was your podcast episode? It was, I have it somewhere here.
322, I believe.
326 called The Kitchen Remedy with Diana Brescia, none other. And that was with Rich and Daisy White, I believe, right, Diana?
Yes, yes.
And in your podcast, we talked about your journey and how you formed the Kitchen Remedy to help people in the community. It's really a powerful story, a powerful website, a powerful business you've created out of your journey. And Britney, is there any other contact information that you want to share besides your Instagram handle, or any other final notes you want to share with our community before we conclude tonight?
Sure. You can, anybody can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's my full name, Britney Serpa-Smith. Facebook, I might be a little bit more difficult to find. I think I'm just Britney Ann. So if you can find me, then you should probably be in cybersecurity.
Well, if this isn't top secret, if you want to share those links, we can put them in the show notes so people can find ways to contact you in the show notes.
And Matt, let's not forget Chronically Hacked.
Oh my goodness, how did Diana, thank you for slapping me around with that one. Could you please just quickly give a plug to Chronically Hacked?
Yes, so Chronically Hacked, my new business venture with my dear friend Michaela who is also on the podcast. We just launched, we just had a launch event last week in Malibu. It's all about tips, tricks, and hacks to navigate your way through chronic illness, the initial stages. So anyone that's lost on your journey, just think of us as your Lyme besties. Chronically Hacked, and you can find us at chronicallyhacked.com. Dr. Richard Horowitz is in the mix in our projects, Ali Hilfiger. So please join us, and the social is at Chronically Hacked.
Excellent. And I mean, I think you couldn't have described it better as your Lyme bestie, because being on this podcast, everybody realizes that they want to be your bestie after hearing you on this podcast, both you and Britney, Diana. So I just want to one final time thank both of you. Britney, your story is so inspiring. We love these interviews. This is pre-recorded. It's everybody listening. It's the Friday night. It's almost 7:00. And for me, I love this because I start my weekend on a super high, thanks to awesome guests like you, Britney, and super excellent co-hosts like you, Diana. So thank you both for joining our Take Bootcamp podcast and sharing what you've learned with our community, because your stories are truly saving lives in the community. So thank you both.
And Britney, it was a pleasure. Thank you. So nice to meet you.
Thank you so much, Matt and Diana, for your time. I am so happy that I did this, and I really hope that my story can help somebody, or
it will help many somebodies. Trust us. We will help many somebodies. So thank you again.